So much for joining us. My name is Latoya Smith. I'm the CEO of Brad City Media, which is a video marketing agency based in Brooklyn, New York. I was also the former Wealth for Life editor for Black Enterprise magazine, but today I am your moderator and we're going to talk about how to go big or go home and win some contracts on today. So that sound good? Yeah. All right, excellent. So our overall goal for this panel is that we really want to help you all understand the supplier diversity process, or just get a better idea of it, and talk about some of the common mistakes to avoid and how you can build relationships. And we have a panel that's just esteemed. I talked to these gentlemen on the phone before we came, and I'm so happy about all the information they're going to provide you all with. So whether you already are certified or you're thinking about getting certified, or have your certification rather, they're really going to give you the tools to help you leverage it and win more contracts. And just so I can get a feel for who is in the room, how many of you are already certified? You're MWBE, veteran, LGBT, okay? And so the rest of you all are considering getting certified to start bidding on contracts? All right, excellent, excellent, excellent. So our panelists, I'm going to start with my far right. We have Kent Hakita, who's the principal of the Switzer Group. They are an awesome design agency in New York. They design creative spaces such as Vice, New York and Company, even IBM Watson out in Munich, Germany. So you all have done some really great work, and Kent is going to be able to provide a lot of great information on relationship building and how to not only get one contract, but how you continue to get more. So let's give him a round of applause. Next we have, to my close right here, we have France Taffo, who's the Director of Supplier Diversity and Development for Nationwide, which is our host sponsor. So thank you, Nationwide, and thank you for sending France. And here in the center, we have Travis Rouse, who is the Chief Sales Officer of M&F Bank, which is the second oldest minority-owned bank in the United States. So let's thank Travis. So Kent, let's talk about the process of landing a contract. Well, you know what? Actually, let's flip it a little bit because we have more people in here than I expected who are not certified. So let's talk about that process. Right. When you all decided that you wanted to get certified, what was the criteria, and walk us through all of the materials that we needed.
As Latoya had mentioned, I'm a principal at the Switzer Group. We're an MBE design firm, architectural interior design firm based in New York City. Lou Switzer is the president and CEO of the company, and we've been in business for over 44 years. We decided very early on to become a certified MBE, and it's helped contribute to our growth and sustainability over many years now. So, and I think that you've got to really develop your, go through all the hurdles, right? Get certified. That's the first step. Take the time and do that. And then start with small steps. I know that the title is Go Big. It takes small steps to get big, right? Be patient. Go for the long game. Start with small successes and build on that. And be persistent, but not a pest.
Kent, when you talked about, you said, get certified is the first step, but it is a process. There are things that you have to have in order. Right. Talk to them about some of the things they need to be thinking about now, whether it's getting financial statements together, whether based on, how you're incorporated, what type of documents you would need so they can start thinking about putting that stuff, because the application can take you days if you have to keep going back to get this certified, this,
Days, months, weeks, and whatever it takes, but you've got to be in it to win it. You got to start again small and set those goals. Get that certification. Then also start developing the relationships with someone like France. Linda Foggy is in the room, and we also do a lot of work with Wells Fargo, get to know your client, your partners, and become a good partner for them. And be able to deliver, because any business relationship depends on your ability as a company to deliver for your clients, and then also establish a good banking relationship, because if you're successful, you'll be growing, and if you're growing, you're going to need financing.
And speaking of relationships, Franz, you're the guy that people need to know. How important is that, and how do individuals, diverse suppliers, go about building that relationship with someone such as a Nationwide?
Well, first, what I probably wanted to do is start off why certification would be important to a corporation.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
since we were starting off the conversation around certification, so I guess I could give some people the idea, since there are so many of you who aren't certified. From a corporate perspective, what it actually, the certification process does for you is, especially with the larger third-party agencies like an NMSDC or a WeBank, what that does is give you an avenue to people like myself. So myself, my team, I have some counterparts from Wells Fargo that are in the room. We work with these organizations to find suppliers like yourself that can help us in being able to achieve some of the goals that we have in our corporations. So without having that certification, you don't have a window to a person like me, because I'm only going to work with the organizations that certify. The reason why it's important for us to certify is because as large corporations that are in a lot of cases publicly traded, we have a responsibility to our brand. Usually supplier diversity is very related to a corporation's brand, and when we tell people that we spent a certain amount of money, in the case of Wells Fargo, over $1 billion a year, in our case, over $300 million a year with diverse certified corporations or with diverse corporations, we need to be able to prove that. So if we were to actually manage programs with the small groups of people that we have to actually assure that a company is 51% owned by the person that they say they are, that a company is actually managed and is actually being run by the person that they say they are, it can be a public nightmare if it's then proven that we're just working with a pass-through. So when she was asking about what you need to get prepared for certification, the process would include, you got to have tax statements. You have to be able to prove that you have 51% ownership in that corporation. You have to be able to prove that you actually run it and that you literally have the hiring decisions, because what those agencies are doing by doing all that and proving that and going and doing site tours to make sure that you actually own this business is to assure us that when they say it's a certification and it's certified and we have a sample of that, then we're assured they've done that job for us. So the certification agency are actually working on behalf of the corporations as well as the suppliers. So I at least wanted to give you that particular perspective.
No, that was really helpful.
First.
Thank you. Well, and you mentioned WeBank, so that is one of the certifying organizations that you all partner with to find diverse suppliers. What are some of those other organizations?
So WeBank is the organization that actually certifies women-owned businesses. You have NMSDC, which certifies all minority-owned businesses. And GLCC actually certifies all LGBT-owned businesses. There are a couple of different agencies that certify services that will vet-owned businesses. The similarity within all these organizations is the fact that the certification process is fairly similar with all of them. So you're gonna have to have tax records, you're gonna have to have proof that you own the business, you're gonna have to go through all the rigorous things that I said you have to go through, but the common similarity beyond that is that you have to have 51% ownership in the demographic that they cover. So if it's a woman-owned business, 51% ownership of that business has to be done by women. If it's an NMSDC, 51% of that business needs to be owned by a minority, so on and so forth. So that's the similarity. And that's also why we work with them. But what it also does, it not just gives you access to people like ourselves, we partner with these organizations to develop suppliers to get them ready to be able to have the conversation with corporations. Because it's around being able to, in some cases, have capacity, so they're capacity building courses. There are things around being able to prepare yourself to have the conversations with corporations, because as you can imagine, you only get that first chance to get a first impression. And regardless of whether you're a minority or a woman-owned business, you're still gonna have to compete for that business with the best. So it's really getting you prepared to be able to do that. So those are the things that you get with certification, is not just access, but the opportunity to help build your business and to get you ready from one level to the next, whether it be capacity building, whether it be expansion, whether it's acquisition, whether it's about strategic partnerships, whether it's funding. These are all things that these organizations will help you get through as well.
Right, and on the other side of that, Travis, it's also really important for diverse suppliers to have a relationship with their local bank as well. Why is that so important?
Well, I think that's important because, you know, as Kent said, as businesses grow, you're going to need money, you're going to need financing, you're going to need help with funding contracts that you get. And so I think having that relationship is key to the growth of the company.
When should you reach out? Oftentimes I'll talk to folks and they wait until they need some money or a line of credit. How early is too early, and what do you need to have in place before they even come and visit you?
Well, it's interesting. I think establishing a relationship with the bank is, doesn't have to wait until there's time to do a transaction. I think people bank with people, and I think relationships are built between transactions. And so as you're working on your annual plan for your business, as you're working on budgeting for the next year for your business, it might not be a bad idea to have a conversation with your local branch manager, with your commercial banker, with your business banker, just to kind of talk about where the business is, where the business wants to go, and how that particular banker can play a role in that process. Absolutely. So the earlier the better. As I said, I think that relationship and connectivity is built between transactions. And sometimes when you have something that's pressing right now, if you've already established a relationship and a rapport, and I'm the banker and I know more about you, it helps that process move a little quicker and a little smoother through the process.
Absolutely. So Franz talked about programs to develop diverse suppliers. I'm curious to know, did you all participate in any supplier development programs?
Yes, we did. We've established our relationship with Wells for quite a long time, but we participated as a current consultant in several diversity events that drew people from the general contracting, the subcontracting business to Wells Fargo as partners to help diversify the work stream. We're building a 500,000 square foot facility for Wells Fargo up in New York City in the Hudson Yards area. So yeah, and again, you see it over and over again. People come out and to an event, and it's an audience similar like to this in terms of numbers, and someone will say, well, how do I get through the door? It's like, well, first of all, you're here. That's a good thing.
Yes.
And then you got to keep knocking, and you got to make sure that all of the documentation is in place, because as Franz had mentioned, if the documentation is not in place, you're not doing yourself any favors, and you're not doing your potential client partners any favors.
So you got certified, you realized you wanted to do business with Wells Fargo, and then you reached out to them and found out they had a development
We
program.
already were certified prior, but then it's just a matter of establishing that partnership relationship, and then ultimately you have to deliver. If you don't deliver the goods, if you're not a good partner or don't understand your clients on your clients' needs and how they operate, and can't deliver on the promises that you made, it's just like any business. So the certification is part of the process. It's also a great opportunity, really, because as Franz mentioned, there's a real need in the business community to fulfill the diversity requirements.
What's great is that you all received one contract, but then you went on to do several others with Wells Fargo. How did you preserve and grow that? Because I think oftentimes folks think, we did this one project, we're done, let's go bid on the next opportunity, but right. Preserving that relationship is so important to other opportunities. Right,
so then again, as a business opportunity and management, you have to develop the talent within your firm, make sure we have the right financing in place so we can have the technology and the tools in place to be able to scale that, so we can build it from one relationship to 2 to 3 to 4, and we've done over 20 projects, designed over close to 2 million square feet, and this is solely for this client, the Wells Fargo client. Over 44 years, we've designed hundreds of millions of square feet for multiple clients.
So you're a good example of a company who seemed to have done it well. I'm sure on the other side you've seen some companies who may need a little work. What advice would you give to people on what not to do?
Well, it kind of what not to do. There's a lot not to do, but I would say several words of advice with companies trying to pursue an opportunity with a large corporation. I think first and foremost, really understand the industry and the space that you're in. Because at the end of the day, as I said before, we are all, especially the corporations that you're talking about, the Wells Fargo, the Nationwides of the world, we're multi-billion-dollar organizations. We most likely will be purchasing, or we already are purchasing whatever service or good that you are offering. So to be able to displace somebody, you have to basically be unique, understand, be innovative, be ahead of it. And what usually I think has been proven with smaller organizations is that you are closer to it because you're not having to deal with a lot of the red tape and you're not having to deal with a lot of the necessities that a larger organization has. Mm-hmm. So your largest advantage is your innovation, but really understanding that space and also understanding the pain points of the company. So when you're pursuing opportunities, I think as business leaders, you guys have very complex things to do. And one thing is, you have to manage your business, you're trying to pursue new business. I think you need to be targeted. One thing that I always advise small businesses when they go to trade fairs, when they go and try to seek opportunities with larger organizations, it's gonna take time because we need you to understand our business and where you play in it better than we do. To do that takes time. And to do that, you have to be targeted. You have to understand the business, you have to understand our profit centers, you have to understand our materials, you have to understand where it is we're going and how we try to go. And the information is out there, but if you're also running your business and you want to target people, and there's so few opportunities to get to meet us face to face, that's why I say you want to be targeted and you want to be exact in your list of who you want to be able to pursue so that when you're having that conversation, it's connotative and it's actually effective. So when you go to a trade show and you know you want your list of 5 companies and you see another company that you want to talk to Nationwide, you want to talk to Wells Fargo, but now you see Starbucks. Well, are you prepared to have a conversation with Starbucks? Well, if you're not, save that for later. Focus on Nationwide and focus on Wells Fargo so that those conversations are deeper and meaner because once again, you only get your first impression. And if you're not ready to talk to Starbucks and you have that conversation with someone and you're not informed and you don't have the information you need, that might be your only opportunity to talk to them. And so that's why I think you need to do that. And secondly, understand your space because there's capacity issues. Depending on whatever it is you're offering as a service or you're offering as a product, we do business with smaller organizations all the time. We've had companies that are 2-3 man offices that we've given opportunities to that over time have grown to a 7-figure relationship with Nationwide now, but they started off with one single opportunity for video marketing, right? In that space, there was an opportunity that allowed for that. We also have opportunities where you might have to do underwriting, where we do asset management. Those things require things like insurances, licenses, things like that, that have a lot more requirements, and understanding that in the industry also gets you prepared because you may not be ready to do business with a large business if you're required to have millions of dollars of insurance to back you up. So I think understanding that also going in will help because not every large opportunity, multi-billion-dollar opportunity is one that's for every business. There are plenty of enterprise and medium-sized businesses that can fulfill you and be able to give you a baseline of business that will allow you to grow until you are ready. Right. So I think being able to project that plan helps because I've seen a lot of businesses fail because they either weren't ready for that big opportunity and they get an opportunity with a large organization and they grow themselves literally out of business. Mm-hmm. Because we also need to remember things like, you guys have bills you have to pay. If you don't have the cash flow to support your business for a while, and let's say you get a large order from one of your large customers, and most companies tend to pay 60 days out, sometimes if you're unfortunate, depending on the industry, 90 days out. Wow. Now, if you order $3 million worth of widgets for a company, are you actually able to sustain that cash flow for 3 months until you get the first check for that 1 month when you got 2 more checks that you laid out to go behind? over time, you do that, what does that do? That grows you out of business. So it's really having a plan to do that, because I've seen that fail with some corporations as well, is having that plan, getting with your bank, being able to maybe set up a relationship, because you have a relationship with a local bank where you say, hey, we have the revenues and the receipts for this. We need the loan based off the receipts, so that until we get paid, we actually have a cash flow. Those are the type of conversations you want to be able to have, and having that relationship with the banker, like he said, will help prepare for that. Because when you need it, the banker's not going to, he's like, receipts. Well, you know, how do I know, you know, that you really need that? So you really want to be able to establish that relationship so that you can build that over time and plan for those type of things.
I'm glad you touched on capacity building, because oftentimes when I talk to diverse suppliers, that's one of the main complaints that they have in getting access to capital. And Travis, I know that M&T Bank just did a partnership with Novak. So tell us how that came about, and how you all are breaking down some of those financial barriers.
Great point. Earlier this year, M&F Bank and Novant Health had a conversation about how could we do more together. And so we had a deposit relationship in place, but our bank is looking to grow loans, and we were looking to Novant to figure out, is there a way to, you know, do some lending with you, et cetera. And out of that conversation was born the Novant Working Capital, Supplier Working Capital Program. And what that program will offer is it will offer suppliers of Novant a loan up to $250,000, or 25% of their contract with Novant. The loan will be through M&F Bank. The business has to be certified, as you talked about before. They have to have 2 years of experience with contracts with Novant, and there are various rates and other requirements. But both of our companies we wanted to do something that helped give these particular suppliers access to capital so that they could fulfill contracts. And it's in its infancy. It's still new, and there's some key learnings that I think we both experienced over the first 3 months of the program. But we're very optimistic about what we can do with this, and use this to be a model for us to go out to some other companies and do it all over again.
A model indeed, certainly, for other African American banks as
Absolutely.
well. So what's the range of funding that you all provide?
Well, it's from 0 to 250, up to $250,000.
Yes. Okay, and it's just for tier 1 suppliers at this point.
It's interesting. We had a conversation about this. We initially set it up to be tier 1, but we realized from the applicants and the conversations that we had.
And maybe we need to explain that too, the difference between tier 1 and tier 2.
Well, tier 1 are those suppliers that contract directly with Novant. And the tier 2 folks contract with the tier 1s that contract with Novant. And so we realized that there were a lot of conversations to be had with the tier 2 folks. And so we have modified the program to consider the tier 2 opportunities as well.
Absolutely. Franz, what advice do you have for tier 2 individuals who want to work on contracts but don't have the capacity? How do they go about getting in front of tier 1 suppliers and building that relationship with them as well?
I would say talk to the individual corporations, to people like myself, when you do go or have an opportunity to be at a trade show, because a lot of organizations like Nationwide, Wells Fargo, a lot of different companies have programs in which they actually set up environments for their tier 1s to meet with potential tier 2s. For instance, in the automotive industry, I know Honda, Toyota, as well as GM all do annual shows at their actual locations where they do a summit. And these are just as large as some of the national trade shows, where you'll literally have 1,100 of their primes there to meet with second-tier providers to have opportunities. Okay. We do an annual summit where we'll provide our top primes an opportunity to come and meet some potential second-tiers that we've met. So usually, just like you would meet for some potential first-tier opportunities with your supplier diversity professionals, there are avenues depending on the corporation, depending on the industry, and even some of those third-party organizations that we mentioned before, like an NMSDC or a WeBank, all have opportunities where they can connect you with primes that look for second-tier opportunities, or even in the automotive industry, third-tier opportunities as well.
Awesome. Have you all ever worked with any tier 2 companies and helped, and they
Well, it's
partner with you on
interesting that you
projects?
mentioned the primes, because up in New York for the Hudson Yards project, Regina and Derek and Linda has set up a Meet the Primes event, several of them actually.
Great.
They would have a meet and greet, and then this is again in the contracting world, the general contracting world. So there's a general contractor and then some of the main prime contractors. So let's say an electrician, a plumber, mechanical contractor. Now some of the certified subcontractors may not have the capacity to do a 500,000 square foot project. However, they can work creatively on partnership arrangements so that they can have a portion of that project and then be contributing to the overall diversity spend.
Okay. Awesome. So I want to turn it over to the audience. I'm pretty sure you all have a lot of questions, especially those of you who are thinking about getting certified. So if you all can just come up to each one of the mics here in the front. And I will take this lovely lady in the purple.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. My name is Chisa Brooks. We are a commercial contracting company, general contractor here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are certified, we are licensed, we are bonded. I guess the question I have, I appreciate the program that you talked about, Mr. Rouse, about the Novant relationship with your bank. I guess to the suppliers, are there programs that you're putting in place? I know on the government side, they've put in programs where you can pay a tier 2 subcontractor in less than 60 days. I think with the government is up to 7 days after the prime contractor has been paid. Are the diversity suppliers looking at opportunities like that to make opportunities more available to minority suppliers when they have these larger projects? Thanks.
That question was direct, okay.
Well, from a corporate standpoint, I will tell you that nationwide, we actually do with our suppliers, even though we have regular, as I mentioned before, 30, 60-day payment terms, we actually have a program where our diverse suppliers that are certified have a 15-day pay period. And I know a lot of organizations that are similar to ours do the same thing. There are several different corporate organizations, large companies that extend that as well to suppliers during their supplier diversity programs, hence why we encourage a certification, because they actually have to go through approval, at least at Nationwide, through our department for them to get approved for that as being a certified supplier of our program.
15 days is good. How many of you are chasing down invoices 30, 60, 90 days past due? I've been there. Anyone else have anything to add to your question? All right, I'll take you over here.
My name is Celeste Freeland. I own Co-Create Consulting. We specialize in project management, mostly IT consulting. I spent all of last year feeling like I wasted my time chasing certifications because I spent a lot of time going after the government sector and those certifications in my local area and then for the state as well, and then found out that there were corporate certifications. So my first question is, you mentioned CVMSDC or NMSDC, and then I think you said WeBank. Does it pay to have certifications from 2 or 3 of the organizations, or does it just make sense to just go after one? Do they kind of offer the same thing?
That's a great question.
I found with a majority, it honestly depends on the company. With our company, it doesn't matter. I mean, having one is just as important as the other. I think with other organizations, because of the fact that, especially the ones that are private companies or publicly traded companies do business with the government, and the fact that they have to report so much, having multiple certifications as a supplier is beneficial to them. So someone like Nationwide, it may not be, because our program is truly regulated towards the business benefits of doing it and doing it because it makes business sense. Whereas, let's say, Raytheon, who has government contracts, has to submit some contracting reports on a regular basis, and maybe having companies that have multiple certifications does make a company like that more attractive because of the type of business they're in. Does that help?
Sure.
I finally did get CVMSDC certification, which I know is linked with the national as well. My challenge now is getting in front of the right people specific to industry. I think that's one of the blocks. What I offer, pretty much every company needs. You know, IT is the backbone for pretty much every company, and they all require project management. But I find that I'm talking to supplier diversity people that don't really know what IT is, don't really understand what project management is, and I'm having challenges getting in front of the right people that speak specifically to what my company offers. Do you have any suggestions there?
I will say with us, what we usually do when we go to these events, we actually bring the sourcing people that actually do the sourcing for those particular areas. So I can say, you know, even though we as an organization, and I think anybody who's in supplier diversity will tell you, IT staffing, plenty of those, please do not come to us from that particular perspective. But there are opportunities from an IT standpoint. You know, agile is an area right now where we're very lacking ourselves, and I'm sure a lot of our counterparts have. You know, AI, robotics, areas where they're looking at being able to make things more robotical, especially from a standpoint of our internal systems and procurement, are areas where they're looking for. There are some special developmental, or I would say IT developmental opportunities because of the limitations of HB1 visas right now. There are a lot of IT prime providers in the IT staffing space that can't provide us some of the developers we need, some of the project managers we need. And being able to understand that space, I think, helps. So I would suggest that you meet with companies who allow you to meet with their sourcing individuals, because they're going to know all the things I just mentioned. I learned all that by talking to our sourcing individuals, not from knowledge. So just trust me. I know enough to be dangerous. But those are the things right now I can say, and I see a couple of my counterparts knocking their heads when I mention some of these, probably having the same issues. Those are the areas right now I can tell you, any company, if you start to have those conversations and specifically about some of those things that I commented on, we'll have a longer conversation with you. Because the first thing a supplier diversity person hears is IT staffing, and they go tone deaf. Because literally, we all have that. Mm-hmm. But if you can be more specific on, sort of like I mentioned, agile, some of those needs around certain project management, certain developmental managers right now, those are extremely lacking. And with us not knowing the direction that this administration is going, political or not, we see that being more of a challenge in the immediate future. And so I think those are the greatest area of opportunities for people that are in your space.
Thank you. That's an excellent direction.
Excellent. Yes.
My name is Matthew Scott. I'm CEO of Art for the Heart, LLC, and I provide men's grooming services. I wanted to know if you guys had ever seen or know if there's any type of work revolving men's grooming services in a workspace. Is that a waste of time to try to move forward and getting contracted in that regard, or can you present something like that? How does the process work in presenting something like that?
And I would go back to saying that would go back to understanding your customer, right? So for us, for instance, you would think, okay, as an insurance company, we probably wouldn't need a need for men's grooming services. We actually have a barbershop on the ground floor of our corporate office. That would be handled through corporate real estate. If I had not worked there or going there, I would never know that. But being able to do some of that research, and sometimes researching is, if you're local to a lot of corporate offices, going there and seeing, because I can imagine that we're not the only people that have a corporate office that leases out space to a barbershop. So, and that barbershop is busy all day long. So that would be an example of, you know, doing a little bit more research and finding out sort of how that area is corporately set up. I'm sure that there are probably a lot of them, but doing some of the digging and the research would be. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a waste of time, but you have to be able to be, as I said before, targeted. So like for Nationwide, for instance, that would be a good service to have, because we actually have those needs in our corporate office, and it is something that we do contract.
But you can contract grooming services though? They do contract them type of services? Or you saying I have to do my research to see if they do that type of contract?
You'd have to find out by company, because it's not something that's mass produced that you're talking about. It's something that's very specific. And how are you going to plan and strategize around that, right? So if you do it one place, how are you going to grow? How do you plan on building it? That's sort of kind of stepping down and being able to build that strategy, and that's going to be part of your plan, is figure out how, okay, now what's my plan going to be if I get the contract? How do I grow? Because if it's just me, you're done. Once you get an opportunity, you're going to need to be there all day. Are you going to hire people? Are you going to contract space? Are you going to lease out other chairs? You know what I mean? Like,
It's a lot to think
that's
about.
a lot of things to think about.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Would you each be able to talk about some of the misconceptions or myths that you've encountered when it comes to different companies trying to get access to large corporations for like supplier and diversity initiatives? Like, is there any misconception that a lot of entrepreneurs of color have when they first approach you about it, and that you feel like you may, that it may be helpful for us to know?
I think pretty much everybody on the stage said it. I think the first misunderstanding is the time that it takes, right? I think a lot of people think I'm certified now, and I actually get emails like that, at least 5 of them on a regular basis, almost on a daily basis. I just got certified through this organization, and now I'm ready to have the conversation with you. And honestly, 90% of the emails, by the time I finish reading them, I don't even know what they do. They just told me that they're certified and they're ready to talk to me, and I'm like, well, that's just wonderful, but yeah, I can't help you. So it's really understanding that first steps first is you're still dealing with a Fortune 500 company. The person that you're going to have to compete against, this is an uphill battle. What we do is provide you that avenue to give you your best foot forward, so that when you are getting that opportunity, which could take months, and in some cases I've seen it take years, to have that first conversation with someone, we're there to help you guide through that. So I think approaching a supplier diversity person with the attitude of wanting to get help and understanding that process, I think is the first thing that you need to overcome. Understanding that it's a process and not something that's going to happen like this is the first misconception. And I think also coming to us thinking that because we've had the conversation, that automatically means we're going to upseat somebody else. Because one thing that you need to understand when it comes to individuals like myself and the people that are on our team, our customer is our sourcing team in most cases that we support, right? And in a lot of organizations, most organizations, the people that do the sourcing aren't necessarily the people that actually spend the money. They help them with a process of procuring items, but they're usually doing it with somebody else's money. At the end of the day, the end user, so whoever is in the marketing department, whoever is in legal, whoever is in finance, whoever is making a decision on whatever service or product you're doing, is the one that at the end of the day is going to make the decision. And for them to take that sourcing individual, that person that needs to be their partner, seriously, they've got to bring them the best potential companies when they're working on that product or project or service. We as supplier diversity people have to make sure that we give them the best diverse suppliers, so that they don't go in there thinking that, oh, okay, there goes one of those supplier diversity suppliers, we're having to do them a favor to be in there. Right. You still got to compete. What that certification gives you is it gives you a window to compete and be at your best, but at the end of the day, we're sticking our necks out presenting you to our sourcing team, and if you don't perform in front of them, they're going to have doubts about our credibility. Then we can't help anybody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. What Franz is saying is absolutely right. It's a multi-step process. It's you got to go long. The first step is get that certification. The next step is develop that relationship with Franz and colleagues in that space as well on the diversity spend side. Then there are the relationships that their clients have. You know, on the I have deal with a corporate properties group project management team. There's also, you know, there could be technology, you know, in-house services, all sorts of other teams that the, you know, the diversity as a kind of aggregator and then connector puts together with procurement and then these other teams. So it's a whole network. And that's also to say that you're competing. You'll always be competing, right? And there are already existing relationships there. That's why, you know, Randy Pausch in his book, The Last Lecture, writes about brick walls. You know, brick walls are made for those who really want to get through those brick walls. And there's a lot of brick walls in your way, but if you have that desire and that tenacity and that persistence, you'll get through that brick wall. And it's just realizing that it's a multi-step, potentially multi-year process, and you know, you may work for 5 years on knocking on somebody's door, and then they say, here's, you know, the first little project, congratulations. Celebrate it.
One other thing
because that might grow into the next one and the next one, and then 500,000 square feet or something.
One other thing I would just advise as a misunderstanding is also too, every single company in the Fortune 500, even within the same industry, is very different. You're talking about large organizations that each have their own culture. And just because something worked with one organization doesn't mean that same exact thing is going to work for the next. So part of your learning process in that time that you're taking is understanding how the company works, because at the end of the day, what you really want to truly be to them is an extension of their own culture and their own people and their own team, to the point where they almost forget you're a contractor. They almost think that you're part of their organization. And to do that, you have to understand how they work. And so that takes time in itself. And as I said, each one is very different from the other. And going into it, understanding that, I think will be also very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing, sir?
How are you?
Good.
So, I have a question. It's kind of related to, well, let me just put it out there. So going the supplier diversity route, you know, it's a great route program to set up, and if you have all, you know, everything lined up and you really compete, you can really do well. My question is more along the lines of, are there other routes as well? Like, let's say your college buddy is a procurement, you know, manager in an area where you want to serve. Is that an area that you can pursue, or are there like general regulations that prohibit it, you know, things like nepotism or things like that, or is it wide open?
I will tell you that that's also, I guess, understanding a company's culture. I can tell you at Nationwide, that would not work. We have ethics, rules, ethics. In fact, if your buddy ever identified or they met, they would probably take them off the project altogether. If you were an actual legitimate supplier for it, they would not let him get involved in the process. At Nationwide, I can almost guarantee that. Because I was on the board of a potential company for us to, a nonprofit, for us to choose a company to do our scrub, when I needed to get a company to scrub our supplier list, I could not do that. I had to have somebody else on my team handle it, just because one of the potential bidders was a company that I was on a board on, which a lot of supplier diversity people are on. That's how stringent those ethics rules are. Okay. I would say that another avenue for you, especially in the area of professional services, something like legal or marketing, advertising, would be going to trade associations, because going down the supplier diversity route, as you said, is one avenue. But if you are somebody who's doing legal services, I can tell you right now, our chief legal officer and our entire department of legal would look at me and be like, where did you get a law degree to tell me that this is a good legal company? However, if you go to trade associations like NAMWOLF, which is the National Association of Women and Minority-Owned Law Firms, where a majority of executives from Fortune 500 companies go to on an annual basis, and you work with them just like you would with the supplier diversity people in their functions, that builds relations. When they find out that you also happen to be certified, if the organization is truly committed, then they'll come to us and say, hey, I found this law firm, you know, we're looking at some potential opportunities, make sure that they're registered and make sure that, you know, they have the certifications you need. You know, the mere fact that you've already build a relationship with somebody that is in that particular piece that understands that, and the fact that it's more specialized and you just happen to have a certification is a whole lot easier than the other way around.
That's a great answer, thanks.
Okay, so we're going to take these last 2 questions before we wrap.
Hi, my name is Nicole. I have one question regarding the Tier 2, Tier 1 relationship for companies. What would be the best strategy? You own a company, you're Tier 2 position, but you have the capacity and you've done the due diligence to scale to Tier 1. You're in a very specific area, cybersecurity, and you have the capacity to scale with leading technologies out there like IBM and et cetera. How would you best prepare that response for qualification when you're in that situation, when it's time to you to prepare that statement showing that you can qualify for like a nationwide, when they're asking for you for the qualification? What are some of the things you look for?
Well, I mean, I think if you have partnered with a Tier 1 that, let's say, Nationwide has used, and you've built a reputation over time, the people that you're going to work with are still going to be internal, even though you're not. The difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2 is who's billing us. Mm-hmm. It's not who you're building the relationships with. So those internal contacts, you're still going to be building relationships with them, even as a second tier. What could possibly be limiting you is that at the time that the contract is up and people are having to make those decisions, I think, is whether you've made that impression as a second tier well enough to be in the conversation when the RFP is up. Because that could be 3 years of you being a second tier, even if you're ready after year 1. You still might have to spend 2 more years as a second tier because the contract's not up.
Okay.
So once the contract is up, then you can start to have the conversation. But until the contract's up, you're going to just be a Tier 2 because the contract is with your Tier 1. It's not with you. Okay. You're subcontracting. Okay. That doesn't change until the contract expires. Okay. Whether you're ready or not, the contract's not ready.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, our last question.
Hi, Michelle Hayward, founder of the tech company Positive Hire. My question is on the development side. As far as us being business owners, what do we need to have in place even before, just as a business, not necessarily certified, when we go to corporations to be a vendor to them? What do we need to look like? What are you seeing that's lacking when we're coming looking for that work?
I think it goes back to understanding your space and understanding your industry. I used 2 examples earlier when I was asked. You know, we as corporations, I have dealt with companies that are small, very small. For instance, when we go to these trade shows, which a lot of us do continuously throughout the year, especially the minority and the women-owned trade shows, we give out things. What Nationwide is known for these shows is giving out these cookies. Well, the cookies that we give out are actually cookies that are made by a woman who owns a bakery in one of those spaces that we have in our corporate office. She's a minority. She's actually attending the show here. She has every year ever since we've encouraged her to get certified. But she's a minority African-American owned woman who opened up the cookie shop way before my tenure, 10, 15 years ago, that we've leased out the space to her as Nationwide, and we've kept her there. She calls the company A Blessed Cookie, ABC Cookies. So what we've done is we've actually hired her to make these cookies for us year-round, a whole bunch of different flavors to go to all the trade shows that we do. Not to mention the fact that by encouraging her to get certified, we actually gave her and partnered her with my counterpart at Walmart to actually have a conversation around being able to support their stores regionally. So that's an example of someone very, very small. Now, I also mentioned the fact that with larger contracts, it may be about not your ability, but your scalability. Because if you don't have the staff to be able to handle the amount of size of transactions or engagements that are going to be needed for your particular industry, you have to get yourself time to either build capacity or maybe form strategic partnerships. A lot of corporations are going in the avenue now where they need national relationships for certain particular providers, where if you're someone that's regional and you do something very, very well, it might behoove you that if you're going to compete for a national contract, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I can tell you in the IT staffing space, one of the 7 companies that we actually consolidated to in the IT staffing space when we consolidated a year and a half ago was a company that were made up of 2 separate organizations that decided to form a strategic relationship. Both of them are minority-owned companies that end up finishing as one of our top 7 based off performance, but also based off coverage. So it's being able to understand where you play in your industry, and that's going to be different from commodity to commodity. So there's no straight answer. It's really kind of understanding where you play in your space, if that makes sense.
All right, excellent information. So we learned a lot today about building relationships, growing relationships with not only the supplier diversity director or officer, but also with your bank. So you guys have some homework to do, and for those of you looking to leverage that, make sure you go to procurement fairs, have your capability statements together, and our panelists will be around to talk to you afterwards. So let's thank them. Thank you guys so much.